Okay, so we've got a couple of things going on here now. We've got a stimulus we need to use. We have a particular style of writing we need to pick. And we've got the fact that we need to incorporate some stylistic influences from a Module C text. So as I mentioned in the previous one, I'm going to be using Atwood's text, and I'm going to show you how to incorporate that along with coming up with a discursive piece, because that's the one we picked just for this example, with this particular stimulus. So what I'm going to go back down to here is that's what we picked from Atwood. So we've got the couple of techniques that we're going to be able to use in our writing. And then from the stimulus, I'm just going to list a couple of key images that would be great to use for this particular task. So as we said, we've got a book. Okay, so the book turned him upside down. So there's a book. And then you've got blasted apart his assumptions. So we've got the fact that someone's mind about something has been changed and the world suddenly looked different. So let's pop that one in. Actually, I like the inside out part too. That could be good. Inside out. That's a metaphor there. Okay, so a couple of different images from the stimulus, but these are the ones that you want to actually specifically use in your piece. Now, the piece doesn't necessarily have to be about a book, but you should have some reference into it. It should be in a meaningful way. Okay, not just someone was sitting there and then there was like a book next to them. It's going to actually mean something. So I'm going to go back to the example that we were kind of working off from looking at whether or not the isolation that we're experiencing during this period has brought us closer together, perhaps to the people in our immediate environment, our households, or is it taking us further apart? So to have a person change, you always want to start with the fact that they're probably isolated to begin with. So there's got to be like the challenge or the conflict first, and then there's got to be the change. Otherwise, you can't see what the change actually is. So let's say we're doing a discursive and we start with, say, an anecdote, because that's what Atwood does in hers. Okay, so you could have an anecdote of how when you first started isolation, it was really scary, it was unsettling, and you could perhaps incorporate the book as something that facilitates your isolation, because a book is something that actually can take you away from people, because when you're reading, that's a very personal, isolated thing to do. So at the beginning of your discursive, you could be talking about how you were in your room, you got your book, and that's protecting you from the people around you. You're isolated, and it's giving you something to do, but it's also meaning you're not communicating or talking with other people. So that could be a place to start. Plus, you can start seeing how the stimulus is being introduced. Then you could progress into talking about how, you start realizing that in reading that particular book, there isn't any communication going on. And so the discussion could start turning into, rather than kind of wanting to be isolated and not communicating with other people, you then start realizing that, and that there is that lack of communication going on, and how does that start making you feel? Now this is actually sounding almost like it could be an imaginative too, but the difference is that if you're doing an imaginative, you'd be showing this particular experience rather than kind of talking more about it as like a speaker or a narrator. And something I suggest to people is that think of a persuasive or a discursive as like a speech. Okay, someone's obviously talking about something. You can refer to personal stories, such as to an anecdote, but predominantly you're making a discussion about something. So the key thing to do in your story is, now that I've given you an example of how to use a book, you want to just make sure you've got the fact that this person changes their perspective, perhaps they're turned inside out, and you actually have those words in your piece itself. So what will happen then is that makes it a lot easier to do the reflection, and I'm going to, in the next video, I'm going to give you some coaching on how to do your reflection statement, which will be a lot easier now that you've kind of organized your particular things that you need to refer to, both stylistically as well as from the stimulus.